Welcome to the 128th season of the Canadian Club Toronto, Canada's Podium. For over a century, this platform has been a gathering place for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to discuss the most pressing issues of our time.
We've been having important discussions and debates around this podium in this country for well over a century. I call this a historic podium of record.
Our club's always been a forum for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to command attention to the issues of our time.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon, members and guests, and welcome to our online viewers too. My name is Scott Belton, and I'm an executive member of the Canadian Club and your host. Welcome to our club's International Women's Day event. Our club, which by the way is led by impressively gifted women, embraces rich discussion and debate on a wide array of issues. If you take a look at this season's lineup, you'll know this to be true. There's a pressing need to discuss gender equality, not just in support of a recognized day, but because the issues pose a serious threat to our social, political, and economic viability and vitality, and I think an opportunity as well. The rise of gender-based violence, climate change, economic volatility, and gender pay gaps, these are urgent challenges that require our attention. Our national prosperity relies on our ability to address gender equality in inclusive and sustainable ways, and our speakers are well experienced to help us understand how. We are grateful to our partners and sponsors who support our ability to present these dynamic conversations. First, let me thank the Canadian Bankers Association for its season sponsorship. Air Canada is our official airline sponsor, and Canada's Forest Trust supports our efforts to capture our carbon emissions by planting smart forests on our behalf. Canadian Club Toronto appreciates your support. Today's event sponsor is TD. Absolutely. We at TD are very committed to supporting equity and equality and this important conversation, and are very pleased to sponsor today's event. We're also pleased to welcome young leaders from the University of Toronto Women's Association and Toronto, sorry, yes, go ahead. And Toronto Metropolitan University's The Dais. Thank you for being here. Now, just a few housekeeping items. If you're looking for club event information, please visit our website at canadianclub.org. If you're not already a member of our club, please consider joining us. You can also access our events on demand as well and live stream for free. And while you're online, won't you please share information about today's events on your favorite social media platform. We thrive on engagement, whether it's networking or asking questions of our speakers. Questions and answer cards can be found on your table. We will be collecting them and sharing them with our moderator throughout today's discussion. For those joining remotely, please hit the red Q&A button on the right side of your screen when we open the floor for questions. And now I'm really pleased to introduce today's guest speaker. Politician, community leader, advocate, trailblazer, and just a phenomenal human being. Mitzie Hunter currently leads the Canadian Women's Foundation, whose advocacy efforts over the past 3 decades have raised more than $130 million and funded over 2,500 programs across the country. Her political experience includes being the first Black woman to serve as Ontario's Minister of Education. Mitzie also served as Ontario's Minister of Advanced Education and Skills Development and Associate Minister of Finance. As a business executive, she served as Chief Administrative Officer of Toronto Community Housing Corp, CEO of Civic Action, Vice President of External Relations and Corporate Secretary at Goodwill Industries, and President of Smart Toronto, a technology hub. In the research and education realm, Mitzie is a senior fellow with the C.D. Howe Institute and a Canadian urban leader at the University of Toronto's School of Cities. Moderating the conversation is Canadian Club Toronto President Tanya van Biesen. She is President and CEO of VersaFI, formerly Women in Capital Markets. Leadership comes naturally to Tanya. She led the Canadian board and CEO practice for a global human capital firm and was also the member engagement and operations lead at Catalyst, a global nonprofit dedicated to the advancement of women and underrepresented groups in the workplace, and is also a phenomenal human being. She's actively engaged in the community. Let me just highlight a few examples. Besides heading our club, she chairs the executive Sleep Out at Covenant House and serves on the advisory board at the Smith School of Business at Queen's University. Mitzie will deliver remarks, and then we'll be joined in conversation with Tanya. Mitzie, please welcome to the Canadian Club.
Thank you very much, Scott, for that really kind and warm introduction. And thank you to TDE for sponsoring today's conversation and celebration of International Women's Day a week early. So today, we have a lot that we want to cover, a lot of ground that we want to cover. And I couldn't have thought of a better room of people to have this conversation with. I feel like you're all my friends, and that we go way, way back. And so let's really, curate that space, because we're here to talk about women's equality and the future of Canada that must involve women. And hello, it's election day in Ontario. So what better day than to really dig down on how we can make this province and country better. And some of you may know that I'm a former politician, but I traded up last year and became the president and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation. I want to bring my background, experience, and resources to strengthen women's equality in Canada, and to ensure that women, girls, and gender diverse people have the brightest possible future. I want to start today by acknowledging the courage and the histories of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples across Canada. And that here in Toronto, we are on the unceded territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, of the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee peoples. And we are here today because still, I felt like saying still I rise, but still, we have the untapped power of women's equality to shape and drive Canada's future. Still. So I'm going to take a few moments just to set the stage. And then Tanya and I are going to sit in these red chairs, and we're going to have a dialogue with you. Let's take a breath, because we've faced a lot since 2020. And just in the last month, more uncertainty, with more uncertainty for the foreseeable future. Our trading relationships in the North American context and even around the world are shifting. We will spend the next few years defining or perhaps redefining who we are and what we value in this country. But one thing that we do value is gender equality. I see nodding heads, thank you. In Canada, 76% of us support gender equality. And we want governments to do more to promote gender equality. Yet, too many structural barriers remain. So I'm going to rhyme off a few statistics, and we're going to be familiar with them. 47% of Canada's workforce today are women, and the majority are still paid 84 cents to every dollar men earn. Despite being 50% of the population, more than 30% of leadership roles, not more than 30% of leadership roles in Canada are held by women, both in business and in our national parliament. Women represent over 60% of university graduates in this country, and I just want to say thank you to our two tables at the U of T and TMU who are here, because I know you're working hard on your degrees and on your education to enter those challenging fields. But what happens when you get there? So on the upside, we have strong policies on parental leave and childcare. So looking to social policy, there are deep disadvantages that remain. Women experience higher rates of poverty than the national average. 1 in 3 Canadian women have experienced some form of violence, and Indigenous women far more likely than non-Indigenous women to feel that pain. Women face barriers to accessing primary care and mental health services, particularly in rural areas. And we've heard this data before, and we understand that things have to change. And frankly, we are running out of excuses to explain to younger generations why we cannot overcome barriers. Because they ask us, when will Canada become more equal? At the Canadian Women's Foundation, we've been doing this work for 30 years. And we don't shy away from these systemic changes. We see barriers and we build solutions. Whether that's around economic independence, addressing gender-based violence, or enhancing leadership of young women. We listen, we advocate, we partner, we move quickly. We are so proud to be within, and we admire and support a network of more than 600 women's organizations across this country. Take a look, if you go online, at our impressive list in our annual report, each name representing a powerful local story of transformation and impact. And I do want to thank my amazing team at the Foundation who are here today. Some of them are here, they're sprinkled around the room. My chair is here, Lori Young, and some are watching online. I want to say thank you for your incredible and your amazing work. It is a gift to our society. Our role is to amplify and empower. And we know how to attract and mobilize resources because we know that the work we do is vital to the power, the safety, the supports, and the rights of women, girls, and gender diverse people across this country. In Canada today, gender-based violence remains one of the most pervasive human rights issues. Despite progress in policies and awareness, women, particularly those who are Black, Indigenous, 2S LGBTQIA+, disabled, or living in poverty, continue to face heightened risks. Every 48 hours, a woman or a girl is killed in Canada. Right now. Over 40% of Canadian women experience some form of intimate partner violence in their lifetime. 40%. I'll let that sink in for a second. Sexual violence is the only violent crime in Canada that is not declining, with more than 600,000 sexual assaults occurring every year, and most are unreported. The National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls identified this crisis as genocide, calling for urgent systemic change. I want you to know that these statistics are not just numbers. They represent women, daughters, sisters, mothers, co-workers, and community members who deserve safety and dignity. Gender-based violence doesn't impact all women and gender-diverse people in the same way. The risk is compounded by racism, economic insecurity, disability, immigration status, and other factors. Black and Indigenous women are overrepresented in our criminal justice system. Trans women experience violence at rates far higher than cisgender women, with limited access to safe housing and healthcare. Rural women in communities often face isolation with fewer support services, making it harder to make that decision to leave an abusive situation. The National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence recently reported that there are huge gaps in the northern communities in this area. Since 1991, our generous donors and supporters have contributed. Where's Scott? I'm going to give you some new statistics, Scott, because we've just updated this, okay? More than $260 million has been contributed to fund over 3,300 life-transforming programs throughout Canada. We are so grateful to receive donations from people from all walks of life. And we also join with philanthropists, business, government, and targeted programs to build targeted programs for women's economic empowerment, safety, and leadership. So I want to share with you a couple of stories. During the pandemic, when we were all told to stay home, we quickly learned that many were unsafe. Domestic and family violence spiked, with more than half of shelters reporting increased demand for outreach services and crisis calls. But lockdown made it harder for people to reach out for support. They couldn't even go to their usual places that were safe. The foundation responded by launching Signal for Help. Do you know this signal? This became a way for women, girls, and now anyone to silently signal to others that they are unsafe and that someone should check in on them. This campaign went viral, won awards, community organizations, law enforcement, and many others have adopted it. It is now internationally recognized and keeping thousands of people safe. Thank you. Governments also recognize the need to urgently address gender-based violence during the pandemic, and they needed a partner to deliver more than $60 million in funding to organizations across Canada. Because of our long-established relationships with local organizations, we were able to get this funding very quickly to those who were most in need. But crisis is not the only thing that we do. We focus on economic empowerment and the future. One of the most exciting areas is with women entrepreneurs, many of them young, many of them Indigenous, Black, or racialized. And we have reached more than 2,000 women to overcome challenges and build business support to support Canada's economic growth and leadership. Recently, I was in Ottawa attending a Black History Month event. 2 fabulous young women came up to me just to say hello. And they were part of a venture lab we funded for feminist entrepreneurs called Found Hers. There is real hope. I hope you feel that. But we must be realistic and acknowledge that our work is far from done. We're seeing rise in anti-feminist sentiment in society and in the economy. And we will use the Foundation's platform to speak out against these emerging trends and speak for the significant role that women play in Canada's future. We're going to talk about how women are accumulating and investing wealth, and how women are expected to inherit the majority of the $1 trillion in wealth transfer in the coming years. These are opportunities, not threats. We need to fix the fact that women entrepreneurs receive less than 4% of VC investment, and we're going to stay current with investments and philanthropic models and trends such as gendered lens investing, peer-to-peer lending, and networks of women investors. In fact, this is kind of a network right here today. I really see that. We were started 30 years ago by a feisty group of women that I respect and admire. Every day in this job, I meet a growing number of women of every age who have that same spunk and sparkle. We're committed to growing our impact. The Canadian Women's Foundation will continue to be the best partner for assisting women in this country to rise. And I am so excited to invite you to join us, to invest in the untapped power of equality. Thank you.
The big red chairs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Nice to see such a warm room of people. I also want to just say hello to the men that are in the audience. Thank you for, and that are also maybe joining us online. Thank you for being here. I think it's really important that we have this conversation together, not individually. So, Mitzie, thank you so much. Yes. Scott introduced you as politician, business leader, advocate, community leader, and you're also my friend. Yes. So lovely to see you. We're going to cover a lot of ground. I will encourage those that want to ask questions. There are Q&A cards on your table. Please fill them in. As Scott said, we'll bring them up here. For those who are online, please hit the submit a question button, and we would love to engage you in the conversation. You and I think, are both inherently optimistic people.
Yes.
But there's a lot of darkness out there, so we're just going to go there. So can we talk a little bit about we are hearing from other jurisdictions, one particularly close to us, about anti-DEI, the DEI backlash, anti-women rhetoric. So tell us a bit about what you're most concerned about in this moment.
That's really important, and so I am always optimistic, and even in the work that we do at the foundation, sometimes I am confronted with things that really do shake my foundation in terms of what people's real stories, real lived lives. And at the same time, I recognize that because we keep moving forward and that we are there and we're supportive and we're making the right and good decisions, that people continue to have hope. I come from a people who have been persistent and never, ever gave up hope. So I will never give up hope. And we recognize that there is a shift that has occurred when it comes to DEI, anti-feminist sentiments, and it's real. It is very real, and there are lives that are being impacted. But we can't let that seep into our Canadian values, because we do have our own set of values and priorities here in Canada. And thank you, TD. Just by being here and sponsoring, you're standing up with a gender lens, with a DEI lens. And that is a corporate stance. And there are many corporations that are taking that stance. And so, we cannot allow that wave and that sentiment to take over, because as I said, the work is not done. Some of the things that I'm most concerned about, reproductive rights. Yeah. It's very important in Canada. It's part of our values that we continue to support that. Childcare, so important. It's so critical. It may seem like something that's happening on the political surface, but it actually has gone very deep into our economy. When I was elected, I kept saying that there was a she session, and that the pandemic was affecting women more than other groups. I just kept repeating that. If you look at my legislative debates, you'll see that. And when you look at the numbers, women in core working age groups between 25 and 54 years old, when you make a program such as childcare available, all of a sudden you have choice. You have choice in terms of what to do with your family. And so these are values that we have in Canada that we have to hold on to, make clear, and fund and support them.
There was an interesting article in the Globe the other day that put forward research that talked about the impact of the National Child Care Program and how that is enabling women across really all of the provinces to enter the workforce. So I think it ties very closely to the other bit of darkness that we have currently, which is these tariffs that are possibly going to be imposed on Canada and what that means for us economically. So can you talk a little bit about what role you see gender equity, gender parity playing in our economy?
Yeah, well, how can we have a conversation about Canada's economy and not include women, 52% of the population? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And so we have to involve and include women in the solution in terms of Canada's economic future. And if we do that, there's a tremendous upside to that. There's $150 billion in GDP growth that's being left on the table because we're not addressing those issues of equality. And so, part of the solution, first of all, we have to be at many tables. I have the benefit of co-chairing the C.D. Howe Institute. It's a think tank that's thinking about responses to the threats of tariffs right now. And we have to continue to be at those tables and to reinforce a gender lens in any solution that is being put forward. Because we know that the jobs that are at risk, the stress to families, all will affect women in the end. Yep. So we have to ensure that they're part of that growing solution that is needed.
Are there any strategies that you've come up with that you can share?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, diversification is a huge strategy. It's one that we're having this, I think it's a wonderful debate that we're having in Canada right now in terms of our companies and how to support them. So when I talk about diversification, it's about the markets that we're tapping into. We can't just have, think about the United States as an easy market. We have to think about the world and how are we going to build and encourage those markets. I talked about the 4% of VC funding. Let's get over that. I'm looking at you, Sherry. Let's fix that. Right? We can make sure that women founders and entrepreneurs and businesses also receive the required level of funding and support because they have ideas and solutions as well that we'll address. And, follow that up with your individual consumer power.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I'm proud to say that I'm a woman designer.
Me too.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
These choices and these decisions are really important. We can't forget about intersectionality and diversification in terms of other groups of women. I'm so thrilled that Sisters in Soldier are here, in Solidarity are here. It's a program that we fund at the Canadian Women's Foundation, because what we realize is that Indigenous and Black women and others were not receiving, not even the 4%. They were not receiving the funding at all. And so we created a program to support those women so that they can be their best. And if you say, well, there aren't any Black entrepreneurs, well, in our one call, we had 600 responses. And so there's an appetite out there, and we need to make sure that we fund and support that.
I want to come back to the what we can do from a policy perspective, but before we do that, I was so struck by the stat that you gave us that every 48 hours a woman or girl is killed in Canada.
Yes.
And I think for hopefully many of us in this room and online, you were raised in loving households and you are in loving relationships now. But for those who are not, that's a very, very real stat that you shared with us. How do you bring that information to the general public? Like, we all need to know that in order to be more activated to make change. So what should we do? How do you bring that message to others?
Thank you, Tanya. And every single person who works for the foundation is nodding vigorously, because that is exactly what we need to do. Every single person in the public needs to know and needs to be aware. And for those who need access to resources and help, on our website, there's a button at the top. It's Get Help. If you click that button, there's a list of national and also by province and territory resources that are there to help and to support. And so it's really being open to the possibility and not looking away. That there could be someone in your life that you know that is at risk and that needs help and support. In this role, I've been the CEO for 7 months, and there is not a venue that I speak at, really literally there is nowhere that I speak at that someone doesn't come up and share their personal story and says either their sister or their daughter or someone is experiencing violence and abuse. And so to prevent this scourge from happening and to stop it if it is, we have to make sure that people get the help and the support that they need and not to look away.
And to be reminded that that happens to all of us, right? Those people look like all of us, and so it's a reminder that it's everywhere in society.
Everywhere in society.
You had a political career, and women are still very much underrepresented in politics. And in fact, that's probably getting worse, not better. And yet, for many of these policy changes to take hold, I think we would be better off with gender balance. So why is it so difficult to get women to run? What advice would you give to women who are thinking about it, but more broadly to policymakers to encourage more women into politics?
So how much time do you have for this conversation? Because I could talk about this all day, and it is election day in Ontario. So hopefully if you haven't voted yet, you'll make sure you vote on your way home. And when we talk about women in politics, and when I was first elected in 2013, I walked into the legislature, and I was the only Black woman in the legislature. And it was challenging. It was lonely in that space because you're experiencing it in a way that others are not. By the time I left in 2023, there were 5 elected Black women of all parties. And I have to tell you, we connected just as women and as sisters, really, regardless of party. So what we have to do is ensure that the space that women is in is one that is welcoming. And it starts really with making sure that women are positioned in ridings that are winnable, that they're given places and positions of decision making, so we're utilizing their skills and their talents. One of my former political staffers is here, and we know that oftentimes people who work behind the scenes often become elected themselves. So more women taking up those roles and joining campaigns and being part of that space of influence, because it's where policy is decided. It's where our futures are decided. We are not just observing what is happening in our world. We are participants of what is happening in our world through the democratic process. So it is one that I believe in, but I believe in it in terms of uniting. So there's a lot of bullying happening for people who are elected. I've seen it myself and for my staff. And there are women who are opting out of that. Yeah. And they're leaving that table and they're saying, I've had enough. And we're losing good people. And we want to attract more. And so, regardless of party, we have to unite against that type of rhetoric. I remember someone shouted at me in the legislature, and heckling is okay. Like I grew up with 3 brothers. I'm fine with heckling. But he shouted at me, Mitzie, act like a lady.
Nope.
Exactly, right? And I took women's studies, so I know exactly what that comment meant. And so I thought about it, and I said, I'm not going to let this slide. And so I approached the speaker privately, and I explained what happened. And I know that member was dealt with because he never treated me like that again. And so sometimes we have to confront that behavior and shut it down, right? It's just not acceptable.
We've got a couple questions from the audience that I want to make sure I get to. So why does it feel so hard to keep moving gender issues forward when there's so much proof that there are, it's better for society and for all of us?
Yeah, and isn't that the question? And I am asked that question. And
it's like, why should I eat my vegetables when I know they're good for me?
Yeah, it is. What I can say is that, because I want you to believe in this cause and that we are moving Canada towards a gender equal society. It's taking time, but we've seen progress and we continue to make progress. What we're doing now, we're measuring more than we have in the past. Because in the past, we didn't expose and talk about things or track them. StatsCan, just in the fall, started tracking intimate partner violence and family violence. So now we would have that set of information. But we have to make it comfortable for people to report and to believe that the criminal justice system, whether it's policing or a judicial system, is going to believe and support them as well. And so what I think is that we can't back down from it or look away from it. We have to continue to push forward. And even in your own workplaces, there are things that you can do to make sure that your organizations are more inclusive of women. We often work with Employee Resource Group who specifically ask us to come in to have this conversation in a safe way for their employees. You want to have everyone feeling like they belong and that they're safe and they're included.
And that they're called in to make change, which actually is the second question we have here is what can we all do today, here and online, to make a difference?
We can do so many things, so many things, starting in families, just how we are bringing up that next generation. I think seeing the nodding, these are the mamas that are nodding, because it is true. Sometimes these societal norms really start at the dinner table. And so we can all have that impact and that effect. I showed you Signal for Help. These are some of the tools that we can look out for and talk about them in our everyday lives so that people who need the support know where and when they can find that support and that help. And really at the end of the day, in terms of the shifts that we were talking about economically and across societies, we can check our own decision making. I'm so thrilled that we're majority women in this room today, because companies said, who should we send? Let's celebrate International Women's Day by putting women forward for this opportunity. And we can do that across many decision tables that we have, whether it's mentorship, sponsorship, creating space, being an ally. And oftentimes being an ally is not stepping in front of that person, it's actually stepping behind and supporting them and giving them the space and giving them the platform to speak.
Beautiful. I think first of all, thank you. A couple things that I took away from what you said today that will really stay with me is, first of all, International Women's Day, I think, is very much a celebration of all the progress that we have made, but it is also a recognition of the collective power that we can use to affect change, and that we are making change, and notwithstanding the fact that there's still many challenges that we need to address and still many gaps we need to address, there is so much power in the collective force that can make change. But the other piece that will really stay with me is we can't look away. This is not someone else's problem, someone else's family, someone else's workplace. It is actually our friends and peers and family members. So we have to be attentive to these signals, literally and figuratively, because, again, the collective power of a society is the thing that lifts us up.
And I also want to say, there's some awful things happening in the moment, right? We see it all the time. Use this moment to unite around the values that we hold as Canadians. Use this moment. Canada has done that in its past.
That's a great way to end. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you to all of you, and happy International Women's Day.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Wow, that was incredible. Thank you again. There's no chance I will do a better job of putting into words anything that was said, but I did have a couple things that I wanted to share from listening. The first, and not all of us, but many of us, and myself included, are in large companies, some who are very committed to DEI and women's equity and equality, and that's true for me personally, and it's true for the organization I support. But a big lesson for me here today was the conversation around equity in boardrooms and economic inclusion in VC is not a separate one from violence and those issues. And I think in the corporate world, we probably have an opportunity to both talk more about that and understand our role in supporting that part of that incredibly important part of equality, and making sure it's not something that's hidden from all of us. I will say, Mitzie, the comment that you made early on, there is real hope and work is far from done, also resonated with me, and I think we can all take both of those incredibly seriously. Mitzie, on behalf of the Canadian Club Toronto, thank you for being here for today, and also thank you on behalf of you and the incredible organization that you are part of, the Canadian Women's Foundation, for the extraordinary work that you do. And Tanya, our club is deeply appreciative of your leadership on many fronts, including leading this important discussion. Thank you. Before we close, I want to invite our audience to visit our website, canadianclub.org, for more information about our upcoming events, including Air Canada CEO Michael Rousseau on March 24th. On March 26th, we welcome Chief Cindy Woodhouse from the Association of First Nations to deliver her national economic statement. And on March 27th, we'll welcome a panel devoted to our Northern Ontario mining imperative featuring the Mayor of Sudbury. I'd also like to thank our AV supplier, VVC Live, for their support. Members and guests, thank you very much for joining us today. See you again soon.